All right, so let's talk about common white fragility reactions and why they are unhelpful. So these are just a list of common phrases and statements that have been said by many a white person. And it's one of those things where as people are looking at these things, you probably may or may not have noticed that you may have engaged in saying one of these phrases. That in itself does not make you a terrible person, but I kind of want to run through these and explain why they are unhelpful, why they don't help the situation when you tell people that in your effort to comfort them, because in actuality you're basically avoiding the deeper issue. I was taught to treat everyone the same. Reality, you were not. Even if people told you, like your friends or family told you, we want you to treat everyone the same. In actuality, the way that our society works is that we do not treat people the same. There's a thing, it's called institutionalized racism. It is made impossible for people to be treated the same. White people, for the longest time, has been given advantages over marginalized, minoritized people. That is just the reality of it all. So even though you believe that you were taught to treat people the same, the way society works, that isn't the case. I see people as individuals. This goes into how our brain sorts information. Reality, this is not the case. You do not just see people as individuals. When you look at a person, say for me, example, hi, you see me, right? But you don't just see me. For those of you who don't know who I am, when you look at me for the first time, you're categorizing a lot of information. You're thinking about my race, you're thinking about my gender, you're thinking about my age. You don't just see me as a person. Really, you don't just see me as a person. You see me as someone in a context of a group within the society. And that's just the case. That is just reality. So as much as you want to treat people as individuals, what you're actually doing is sorting information and putting people into categories. That is the way that our brains are wired, and that is unfortunate. That is unfortunate, but that is the reality. And because we sort things into categories, obviously it leads into stereotypes, right? But to say something as I see people as individuals is just not true. It's not. So, racism is in the past. We talked about the news, so we know that's not true. Moving on. Race does not have any meaning to me. You may want it to not have any negative meaning to you, but race does have meaning. It has meaning to everyone. Our society characterizes people into certain races and ethnicities. They are arbitrary, completely arbitrary, made by humans. But race does exist. And so as much as you don't want it to have any meaning, which I'm pretty sure in this case when people say don't have any meaning, they mean don't have any negative meaning. The way our society works is we have internalized negative connotations for some races over others. That's just a fact of reality. Don't judge a book by a cover, kind of like I see people as individuals. We make assumptions about people all the time based on appearances, etc. So to say don't judge a book by the cover, we're ignoring the fact that we constantly do that all the time. Everyone struggles, but if you work hard. This one is talking about what we call the myth of social mobility. It's this internalized story script that a lot of people have heard growing up, most likely, that if you work really hard, you'll be able to get all the advantages that you want. You'll be able to get the job you want, the money you want. And for white people, for a lot of white people, that is the case. They can. But for a lot of people of color, marginalized communities, we know that this is not the case. Institutionalized racism, once again. Certain groups of people, white people, are put at an advantage over other marginalized communities. So it doesn't matter as hard as you work, those opportunities aren't necessarily going to come to you. My parents were racist, but I'm not. Or my parents weren't racist, I'm not. Once again, as I talked about it, all white people have internalized racist values and attitudes. They do. So as much as you don't want to say or acknowledge that, it is a fact. In kind of the way the good, bad binary, as I was talking before. When you're saying racist, what you're really saying is that we're not bad people, right? So I am not a bad person. My parents were racist, they were terrible people, and I don't want to be a terrible person. Where in actuality, both of these generations, in this case, have internalized values. And so maybe one of them was acting on it more overtly than others. This person or individual happened to be Black. That's a lot one too. So kind of going back to I see people as individuals. When you're looking at a person, you can't just separate the race from the person. As much as people want to acknowledge me as a person, they're going to look at me and they're going to see a Black woman. That's what they see. And so it doesn't matter what happens to me. You can't take race out of the picture because that is essential to my being. All right. Let's talk about microaggressions. Microaggressions are those what people of color experience on a daily basis. It's those kind of small, subtle, or not so subtle, sometimes, digs into our character. It's a lot of times perpetuated by people that don't even realize that they're doing it. A lot of times it's intentional, and because of that fact, it's hard for people to acknowledge it because they'll say, well, I didn't mean to say it that way, or I didn't mean for you to interpret that way. It doesn't matter about intentions. You say it, and the person received it in a negative way, and you have to acknowledge that and be accountable for that. What are some examples of microaggressions? I'm glad you asked. So in this video, it's about a group of girls who talk about these common phrases that they've heard from people. You don't act Black, but you sound white. Can I touch your hair? You're lucky there's affirmative actions. You don't dress ghetto. You're pretty in an exotic way. So let's talk about them and split them into categories, some more examples. So Dr. Sue is a person that did a study on racial microaggressions, and him and his team were able to kind of split it into different categories of types of racial microaggressions. So I'm going to show you what some of these are, and I'm going to explain them. All right, so examples. The theme, alien in own land. So in this example, it's when Asian Americans or Latinx Americans are soon to be foreign born. So they look at them and they say things like, where are you from? Where were you born? You speak good English. The message underneath this is you are not American, you are a foreigner. Ascription of intelligence, meaning assigning intelligence to a person or color on the basis of their race. You're a credit to your race. You're so articulate. Or asking an Asian person to help with a math or science problem. In these cases, you're basically having these hidden meanings such as people of color are generally not as intelligent as whites. So when you see someone intelligent, you'll say something like, you're a credit to your race. It's unusual for someone of your race to be intelligent. You are so articulate. All Asians are intelligent and good in math and sciences. Therefore, you ask them. Color blindness is the third example or third category. Statements that indicate a white person does not want to acknowledge race at all. When I look at you, I don't see color. Denying a person's color, racial, ethnic experiences. America's a melting pot. Assimilate or acculturate to the dominant culture. So you kind of get the theme. Criminality or assumption of criminal status. When a white man or a woman clutching their purse or checking their wallet as a Black or Latinx person approaches or passes. You are a criminal. That's the hidden message. Denial of individual racism. I'm not racist. I have several Black friends. Oh, that's a popular one nowadays. That's a popular one. The hidden meaning though, the reason that it's a mistake, it's a microaggression, is you're saying I'm immune to racism because I have friends of color. Let me just state this up front. You can still have racist attitudes and have friends of color. Just because you have friends of color doesn't mean that you don't have internalized racist attitudes. Myth of meritocracy. Statements that assert that race does not play a role in life successes. So, example, I believe the most qualified person should get the job. People of color are often given extra unfair benefits because of their race. So the myth of this idea that affirmative action, is giving people of color a leg up. When in actuality, the group that benefits from affirmative action the most is white women. The more you know. Ready for some more? All right. Pathologizing cultural values or communication styles. Asking a Black person, why do you have to be so loud or animated? Just calm down. Hidden message, assimilate to the dominant culture. Second-class citizen. A occurs when a white person is given preferential treatment as a consumer over a person of color. Example, a person of color is mistaken for a service worker. You go to Target and you just assume that that person walking next to you is someone that works at Target. People of color are servants to whites. They couldn't possibly occupy high status positions. Personal example for me is when I tell people that I am a therapist or that I have a master's degree and they go, "Good for you!" It's like a shock for them to realize that. So, those are some examples. Kind of want to highlight this last one here. Beyond microaggressions, there's environmental microaggressions, which are one level up, and then macro level microaggressions. So college and university with buildings that are named after white heterosexual upper class males. Television shows and movies that feature predominantly white people without representation of people of color. Overcrowding of public schools in communities of color, overabundance of liquor stores in communities of color. People of color don't or shouldn't value education. People of color are different. All right. So that wraps up our part of the segment where we go over white privilege and fragility. Our next topic, we're going to go over how to be an ally to people of color and how to handle being called out when you beep up, because it's going to happen. See you next time.